The first of the white roses I grow here at North Lodge Cottage in bloom today. This is Desdemona from David Austin Roses, bred and introduced into the market in 2015 and named after Shakespeare's heroine from Othello. This is one of the whitest roses that David Austin grow. There's about half a dozen white ones that they do. This one for me is almost porcelain grey, and I describe this as being very, very white indeed. Let's start with the buds, shall we? The buds are a wonderful peachy pink colour, very, very tight on the formation. Once again, please do excuse a little bit of white fly about. There's almost a cerise stripe up the middle of each petal, which bleaches out as the actual flower itself opens. Opening very, very flat indeed. You can see the side profile of this particular bloom. Very, very flat indeed. A very old rose shape to the actual bloom. Very round, very flat. Reminds me a little bit of the shape of something like Darcy Bustle and Olivia Rose Austin. I describe this rose as being whiter than white because it really is for me porcelain white. The colour of very, very fine white bone china from 1800s, 1600s, things like that. Very, very grey, which makes this rose very useful if you have a very modern garden. Maybe you have lots of render, maybe you have lots of stonework that you want to pick up the colour. This particular rose in certain lights goes the most wonderful grey white, not creamy, not peachy, but very, very white indeed. This flat formation to the actual flower shape, you can see, is wonderful for actually enjoying its fragrance, which is very, very strong. It's a very clean fragrance, reminding me, I know it sounds a bit silly, but reminding me of things like gin and tonic. Lots of citrus edges to the flower, lemons, limes, things like grapefruit, cucumber, mint. A very, very clean fragrance. Very free flowering. This one is early into bloom this year. Didn't start flowering this early last year, but it is in bloom now and will flower on and off all the way through the season. Now, David Austin say this particular rose only reaches around 3.5 feet. But for me, it's a little bit taller than that. Now, I do leave my roses quite on the tall side during pruning. I don't like to bend over to be able to smell them and have a look at them. Instead, I choose to stake them. So the height might actually be coming a little bit from my pruning regime. But for me, this particular rose is coming up 3.5, 4, maybe 4.5 feet. But this one is Desdemona from David Austin Roses, a really lovely white flowering rose. Now later on in the season I'm going to line these up again, just like I will do with all the other ones that you're asking me to compare with the other white roses. And once they're lined up, you'll see just how white this particular bloom is. When you compare it to something like Imogen, Tranquility or Litchfield Angel, you'll just realise how chalky, powdery white this particular rose is. A really lovely free flowering shrub with a modern twist. So if you do have a modern garden, you want something a little bit traditional to go with it, Desdemona might be a rose that might be really good for picking up, I say, colours of render and paving in your garden. So a lovely one from David Austin Roses. This is Desdemona.